All set. You can call the meeting to order.
Okay, welcome to the City Council Committee of the Whole meeting, where we're hopefully going to get a demonstration as to how the body cameras actually function in real time. I just want to thank Councilor Ramos and all of his efforts regarding body cameras in general and the real push behind getting those into our Springfield Police Department. Councilor Ramos originally had called for this meeting, so I am going to turn it over to Councilor Ramos to help facilitate what it is that he'd like to see. And we can certainly start off by, before I give it to Councilor Ramos, I'll say we're joined by Councilor Allen, Councilor Gomez, Councilor Fitton, and of course, Councilor Ramos. But if I cannot see the Situation Room and who is there, so I think that's Ryan at the podium. Is that?
That's right, sir.
Is that accurate? So Ryan, maybe you want to just do a quick introduction as to who you're joined by, since I cannot see them. Let me see if I can make my speaker bigger, and then we'll turn it over to Councilor Ramos. And Councilor Ramos, you can help facilitate this one.
All right, with me today is Commissioner Clapprood, Deputy Chief Daniel, and Lieutenant Randolph, who have been spearheaded this body-worn camera campaign, and the Director of Business and Technology, Jennifer Leiden, who has kind of been here since day one throughout this whole process.
Thank you. Councilor Ramos, the show is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, thank you for putting this meeting together. It's been a pretty big challenge to adjust from in-person meetings to Zoom meetings, but I'm glad that we were able to accommodate this demonstration via virtually. This is an important time in the city of Springfield and in our country. Now more than ever, transparency in government and particularly in policing is of utmost importance. And I'm glad that we're here today to get a demonstration of the body cameras that our police officers are going to be wearing. I want to thank everyone that has been involved in this process, from the police department. Jen, you have been very, very helpful. Appreciate all your efforts in making this happen. I want to thank all my colleagues who supported this initiative from the very beginning, and we're finally here. So I'm anxious to see how these cameras work, what they can do, what they cannot do, and how this is going to help our the issue of police and community relations in the city of Springfield. So without wasting any more time, I just want to turn it over to the police department for their presentation, and then from there we'll go to questions.
Councilor Ramos, thank you. Councilor Hurst as well, and all the councilors that are here today. Appreciate your time. We're going to show you what the camera actually is. We have a PowerPoint demonstration which kind of outlines the Cliff Notes version of the policy, which we sent you last night. That policy is it's very fluid, because as officers go through the training, certain things are adapted. So when that got reviewed June 3rd, there's certain things in the PowerPoint that have been changed since even the document I sent you last night. And if you can wait until the end, I think we may answer a lot of your questions throughout the presentation. We'll be glad to answer any questions you may have, but if you can just hold off those questions till the end, that would be wonderful, because we may answer them in the time being. So first, I'm going to let you, if you can pop me back on camera. First this is the actual body camera. Officers have on this device, there's a little magnetic clip. Lieutenant Randolph right there is actually wearing one. When officers come into their shift, they will power it on with this power button. Now, throughout the shift, it is constantly on. Every 30 seconds it is not activated, it refreshes. So we'll get into how it's activated and the times it's activated throughout. But up here is the lens, and this is the manual activation button as well. It also activates via Bluetooth. The goal is not to capture every single second of the day. The goal is to capture specific instances that are specified throughout the policy. And throughout that policy, if we can go back to the PowerPoint now, the first thing, when our Winborn consultant came in back in February, it worked with our officers and our body-worn camera unit staff to develop what our objectives are. And if we can go to that second page of the PowerPoint whenever you get a chance, the #1 objective is, through these 5 that we went through, is to provide compelling evidence in criminal prosecutions by recording events, statements, searches, and other key moments in the early stages of a case. Also, promoting accountability and transparency about the Springfield Police Department and the work of SPD officers, thereby enhancing community relations. Also, improving the behavior of both the citizens and SPD officers when they know their conduct is being recorded, thereby increasing safety and reducing use of force incidents. Debunking frivolous complaints about SPD officer misconduct, saving the police department time and money, and allowing the police department management to monitor the work of their officers, both for training purposes and in situations where an officer's performance does require some sort of reviews. Now, back on June 3rd, and is it possible, Steve, I don't know if we can get into that PowerPoint again, page 3 of that whenever you get a chance. Back on June 3rd, we had our first officers were outfitted with body cameras. Right now, we have 6 officers who are our trainers, plus 24 officers, so 30 total as of today that are certified. So the general information, body cams, they do not have some of the technological enhancements that you're talking about in terms of facial recognition software or even night vision. Now, if you hear about facial recognition in terms of our body camera program, the only thing is in our redaction software, which helps identify the shape of faces, that helps blur things for people's identity. It does not recognize who a person or an individual is. It just recognizes the shape of a face to help blur it in redaction. Police officers, one thing you should realize, police officers do not see or hear everything that the body cameras record or capture while they're responding to a call. The SPD will follow all state and federal guidelines regarding the release of body-worn camera video, the release related to any active or ongoing criminal investigation, including high-profile incidents. It's going to be determined through a collaboration with the Commissioner's Office and the District Attorney's Office. Body-worn cameras will always be on during an officer's shift. Footage is recorded and saved from 30 seconds prior to when it's activated. Audio recording begins at the point of activation. So let's say an officer is in the bathroom and they get a call, they're running out. If there's an incident in the building here, you'll have video of them beginning the run and the audio kicks in at the point of activation, 30 seconds at the point of activation. The previous 30 seconds when they're responding to that activation button, you'll be able to see that video. Now the activation, whenever the emergency lights are activated in a cruiser, the body camera goes on through Bluetooth technology. It's also manually at the officer's discretion based on the SPD policy, which we'll get into a little bit here. If there's any immediate threat to the officer's life or safety making activation impossible or dangerous, the officer shall activate the camera at the first opportunity they are reasonably able to do so. And the body-worn camera should not be deactivated until the encounter is fully over and the officer leaves the scene. These recordings are required. There are some mandatory recordings, some are at the discretion of the officer, but everything from vehicle stops, investigation, interactions, safety frisks, canine searches, pursuits or emergency driving, when those lights go on, the cameras come on. Crowd control incidents that have the potential to become unlawful, adversarial events, including any use of force incident if not previously activated. That may mean someone, all of a sudden you're talking to someone, it may be somewhat of a calm situation and they attack an officer. Any type of field interviews, loud music calls, trespass warnings, and if a citizen asks the officer to record the event, they must activate that camera. Now, some of the things that are discretionary, civilian contacts, somewhere where the officer believes should be recorded to increase transparency and or preserve the factual representation of the interaction. Any contact that becomes adversarial, including use of force when the body-worn camera hasn't yet been activated, using it for evidentiary purposes, and situations that just may help and document or support written reports, evidence collection, investigations, and court testimony. Now, some things you can't record or prohibited recording unless it's some sort of adversarial event or when a situation becomes disruptive out of the blue. So patient care facilities or patient care areas of hospitals or healthcare facilities, medical calls, confidential informants, If a person asks an officer to stop recording if certain exigent circumstances do not apply. Some privacy issues pop up. So recording within a residence. Basically, unless a crime is in progress, you're not going to be recording in a residence. So before entering a private residence without a warrant, the officer shall seek the occupant's consent to record inside the home. If the citizen declines, and in the absence of exigent circumstances, the officer shall not record in the home. Officers recording in the residence should not record what is beyond necessary to capture the interaction with the citizen. They shouldn't be going around looking for things around the home. It should be that interaction with the person. And some of the exigent circumstances include or not limited to issuance of a warrant, pursuit of a suspect, domestic-related calls for service that could become disruptive or assaultive, search and seizure, etc. There's a reasonable expectation of privacy, and officers may exercise this discretion based on certain circumstances to turn off or record audio only if appropriate, if it doesn't impact an investigation. We're talking about inside locker rooms, places of worship, religious ceremonies, certain locations in hospitals or clinics, law offices, daycare facilities, places like those. Now, in terms of notice of recording, your officer should be, now this is going to be a learning curve, I bet, for some officers, but to start off their conversation from a traffic stop or whatever else, sir or ma'am, you're being recorded. Something as simple as that. I think over time, from my days back on the news, when you have a microphone in your hand, there's a reasonable expectation you're being recorded. I think over time, as the body camera program here moves on, that reasonable expectation will be there as well with interactions with our citizens. But, you know, officers shall inform citizens they're being recorded unless there's an immediate threat to their life or safety. In terms of consent to record, we're talking about victims and witnesses here. Officers are not required to obtain a verbal agreement to record in most cases. If a citizen does request an officer to stop recording, officers have no obligation to do so depending on the circumstances of the actual incident that's going on. Any request to turn off the body camera should be recorded as well as the officer's response. So if someone says, hey, can you please turn off that camera? The officer, I'm going to turn off this camera because of privacy concerns or because this may be a witness or a victim. They should be verbalizing that as well. Officers should use discretion when recording victims or witnesses. If a victim's unsure in any way of the need for a recording or is uncomfortable with being recorded, the officer shall inform the victim the body camera should be or can be turned off. Some of the questions about who's going to wear body cameras. All uniformed officers will be wearing body cameras. At the request of the superintendent of the schools, our Quebec unit officers will not be wearing body cameras on campus during normal school hours. The schools do have approximately 1,500 to 2,000 cameras within their building. So those areas are covered. The superintendent, due to privacy and other issues, asked that they not wear them. Now, in the terrible case of a school shooting, if you have responding officers to a school, they will be having their cameras on and entering the building with their cameras activated. So when an officer responds to a school that's not the designated officer for that school, they will be capturing footage. The Quebec officers in the school will not be wearing them at the request of the superintendent. Deactivation. So when are these officers going to be turning them off? In most cases, once it's activated, it's going to keep going until the event's all set. Victim or witness interaction, when that is done, you can turn it off. The incident is over prior to an officer getting there. They're called for assistance and it's all set. They don't need to have it running at that point. The event is of sensitive nature and the officers weighed the discretionary recording considerations. And all individuals have been released or left the scene and an arrestee has arrived at the police department for booking. Transporting officers shall also continue to record until the arrestee arrives at the booking desk where there is also video and audio recording inside SPD headquarters. When we're talking about video retention, how long, this is one of the things that's changed in the last week or so after conversations with the law department and the district attorney's office, and this can be and may be modified at any point with any legal input because it's new here, but non-crime incidents, we're going to be storing it. All of this is getting stored in the cloud. Non-crime incidents will be stored for 1 year, misdemeanor incidents and arrests for 6 years, felony arrests for 15 years, and any criminal homicides will be stored indefinitely. For public records requests, this could be members of the media, members of the public, the city council, lawyers, whoever. Public records requests will be made through the City of Springfield website and its public records portal, which is what is done currently. Those records will then be sent to our records department here and our body-worn camera unit to do certain redactions and other things. So the release of body-worn camera video related to any active or ongoing criminal investigation, including high-profile incidents, is going to be determined between the Commissioner's office and the DA's office. Part of the key is to make sure any cases are not tainted, that witnesses are not compromised, that you may be able to get witnesses before they become biased or prejudiced in a way by seeing certain video. Video audio is going to be redacted when it's released to the public by SVD policy. To the courts, they'll get a clear version. And all body-worn camera recordings, including the case of any attempted murder of a police officer or an officer-involved shooting, will be made available at the discretion of the police commissioner and the district attorney's office after the initial incident. Some of the things we've discussed in terms of high-profile incidents when there may be a need for immediate response is to bring in a group of community leaders that would be able to view it, sign a non-disclosure agreement about it, be able to talk to their constituents or other people in the community that they did see it, and they can respond until the DA and the commissioner are able to release that type of video. So those are some of the things that we're addressing currently to make sure we have a handle on it before any high-profile incidents, if any high-profile incidents ever occur. So now we're going to move on to our video portion. The first video is when our officers are training. These are some of our training officers. It was filmed at the Police Academy on East Street. This is a redacted version, something the public would get. It's officers playing actors and officers acting as officers. And they are responding to a domestic dispute between a man and a woman. If we can play video one, that'd be great. Am I losing it?
No.
Here we go.
If you want to take that back to the beginning and,
Unmute it.
yeah, it's probably muted. Oh, okay. There's no audio for the first 30 seconds, but that had started in the middle there. So 30 seconds prior to the officer activating the camera, this was what was going on. So the cameras captured those previous 30 seconds of video only. The audio is going to kick in at that 30-second mark. So when an officer hits the activation button manually or it goes on with the blue light, you're going to see the previous 30 seconds of interactions.
Should be on now. Are we sharing the audio?
We're trying to. We can't figure out why it's not playing.
You need to go.
Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
Right, correct. He's trying to.
Steve, if you want to take it back to that 30-second mark when that audio kicks in, that'd be great.
Like,
Yep.
I don't keep going with the same thing. Recording. Get the hell out of here.
Hello? Hello? Hey guys, how you doing? What's going on here, ma'am? Come talk to me, please. Can you tell me what's going on today? Give me a little backstory. Who's he to you?
That's my ex. He
Okay.
keeps coming over here. He
All right.
went to my job. He just keeps on bothering. Yeah, he just keeps on. He wants out. I told him he needs to come with you guys to come get his son.
Right, correct.
He's trying to. He keeps going to my job.
Yeah.
He keeps calling. He doesn't stop.
Okay.
He keeps showing up at my house, like,
Yeah.
and I keep telling him the same thing. He's
Okay.
supposed
Did anything physical happen at your job or at your house today before we arrived?
No, it just again he just keeps on.
Okay. Are you aware of what a restraining order is?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an active restraining order against him?
Yeah, that's why he wants you guys to come over here.
Okay. All right.
That's why he needs to come here with you.
So he has a restraining order. Has he been served it through your knowledge?
Yes, he knows. That's why he's supposed to call you guys to come here.
Okay. All right. 1 second. Echo 1 on 4.
Steve, can you pause that for 1 second?
What's her name?
Sorry?
So you see the box over their head, that's going to be the redaction or if you talk about the facial recognition software that we have, that is just something that recognizes faces and helps you redact that. With domestic violence calls, with juveniles, with victims, other things like that, they're going to have to be redacted to anyone except to the courts when they're released because of the privacy laws in the state. So in this case, we have a domestic violence incident. Their faces are going to be redacted in terms of anything that's released for those. So we can continue moving on with that.
My name?
Yes. What's your last name and date of birth?
And date of birth is 1.
Echo 1 on 4 to records. Yeah. Could you do a 209A violation for me? Okay.
All right, so in there you also see personal information, audio redacted, her birthday, her name, things like that to help protect privacy. And when you see the camera view, it's also the officer's point of view that the camera may see more than what he's seen. The officer in this case may be focused on the person that's maybe violent, but the camera does see a little bit more than the officer may be focused on. If we go to the next video, this is your typical traffic stop. It turns into something a little bit more, but if you look at some of the redaction here as well, when you show a driver's license, there's pertinent information on there. We're here to protect people's rights and all that as well. So you see the driver's license will be redacted when information is released to the public, as well as any faces or things like that, depending on the situation based on the policy. But this was going to be a traffic stop and what you may see from officers pulling someone over on the street. While they're doing that, one of the things you can see in terms of what could be easily released and what could not be easily released, we're talking about crimes that are investigated versus incidents that may not be crimes. If there's someone that's complaining about a rudeness officer being rude at a traffic stop and there was no crime committed, that is video that may be released through a public records request very quickly. But if there's something else added to it where it's an investigation going on, that may take some time to release some of that stuff, and that'll all be based between the detectives, the commissioner, and the DA's office here to decide how that gets sent out.
You know you can't be having this in your possession.
That was my friend left it in there.
Okay.
I just drop them off and that's beside.
All right. A few minutes, please.
We're not seeing the video.
We hear the voice, but we don't see the video.
Stand by.
You back that up, please.
So we're gonna run them.
So once again, an officer, in this case, activates their emergency lights. The 30 seconds prior to those emergency lights being activated, you're going to get a video recording. At that onset of the emergency lights being activated via Bluetooth, the audio starts here.
you doing, sir? Can I see your license registration, please?
Sure, it's right this way.
So the reason I stopped you is for that stop sign you ran back there.
I didn't see the stop sign, sorry.
See that beer you got there? Come on. You know you can't be having this in your possession. Right?
That was my friend left it in there.
Okay.
I just drop them off and that's what I
All right.
ran the stop.
Give me a few minutes, please.
Sure.
Run him, check his status. Issue him a violation for the stop sign and the open container. Got a valid license. Citation. Give him a warning for it. All right, sir. So unfortunately, I got to give you the violation for the stop sign and the open container, okay? It's a warning.
Oh, okay.
However, it
Thank
does
you.
go on your record, okay? All right, so
Thank
here's your paperwork. I'm going to dump this.
Yep.
In the future, you can't drive with these, all right? It's a city
Sorry.
ordinance against the law, okay?
Sorry, it wasn't mine.
All right, drive safe.
So you can see there the officer manually turning off the camera at the end of the incident there. So that wraps up the videos, 2 examples of what we're going to see. You have a Cliff Notes version of the policy that we went over. We also have a review unit, the quality assurance unit that's going to be reviewing along with supervisors, videos, random videos of officers to make sure they're in compliance. The beginning, the goal was training and getting people used to it. Down the road, there could be potential disciplinary actions for not using it, but in the very beginning, it's all about making sure officers are doing it right. If you have any questions, we would like to answer them at this time. The commissioner does have to leave in about 15 minutes, but everyone else is here for as long as you need.
Councilor Ramos, I'll yield the floor to you, sir. If you want to start off the questioning and take us in whichever direction you want to lead us in, I'll defer to you.
Sounds good. Thank you for that presentation. That was very informative, and it gives us a pretty good idea of how these cameras work. I do have a couple of questions, and if councilors have questions, if you can raise your hand, we'll go in order of the people who raise their hands. The first one is, what does this timeline look like for a department-wide use of these cameras?
So as of right now, we have 30 officers. We are saying by the end of the year, because of everything that's been going on, it's very possible by the end of the summer that the officers will be outfitted with it. There'll be a larger rollout shortly as we work out some of the kinks, and then the detectives and plainclothes officers will be assigned the cameras. So, I mean, I would say hopefully by the end of the summer, but we're publicly by the end of the year with coronavirus and hiccups and everything else with delays, that would be what we would say at this point.
That's good. Now, does an officer have the ability to erase a video on his own?
No.
Deputy Daniel, you want to take that?
No, once they download the video, it goes into the cloud, and it's just there until it reaches its expiration date. So no, they cannot.
But once the video is recorded, they don't have the ability to erase it on their own.
No, they can only turn those cameras on and off. They can't do it. They can't manipulate the data in those cameras at all.
Thank you. We have a question from Councilor Allen.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Orlando. My question is more on the cultural changes here in terms of how receptive have the officers, the regular patrol people, how have they been to this program? Is it something that people have mixed feelings about or more positive, whatever? Any question along the lines of that?
Okay, so once we got the cameras on the street, I actually went around and I talked to officers, I talked to supervisors, and I was actually amazed the officers have been very receptive to this. They feel happy that they can get their side of the story out. So right across the board. And I've also heard like from supervisors about how they've seen officers' behavior improve. They'll have a traffic stop and, you know, polite from beginning to end and stuff like that. So if the cameras facilitate that kind of connection with the public, you know, we absolutely appreciate it. You know, but I have nothing but positive things. And when we started, most of our people that we're training are our grizzled veterans that are on the day shift. So we figured they'd have to give us the most pushback, but they're actually very receptive to this, and it's working out great so far, you know, with that small sample that we have now.
Just a follow-up, if I could. So let's just say an officer has, I don't know, 5 traffic stops in a shift and gets a complaint on the 5th one that it wasn't handled correctly. Is the video of the first 4 available to show how the person, in other words, can it be used to show historically how an officer responds to citizens' interaction?
Absolutely. You know, we can, every video that the officer is involved in is going to be in the cloud and we can review it. Any supervisor can review it. And if the person doesn't have a history of doing negative things towards the public, and that's like a one-off, we believe in progressive discipline here. So we'll, you know, administer discipline or retraining as appropriate.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm all set, Orlando, on that.
Okay. Before we go on to the next question, does anyone have any questions for the commissioner since she has to leave in a few minutes? Any questions for the commissioner? Councilor Fenton, do you have a question for the commissioner?
I do, yes, thank you. My question is regarding collective bargaining. Given this rollout, Commissioner, do you expect any grievances based on this program from the union?
Thank you, Counselor. And no, I don't. And one of the reasons is they've been involved with us from the start. They were at early meetings. They've been allowed input into the policy. And I can say with confidence that both the Patrolmen and the Supervisors Association has been very receptive and very good with this body-worn camera program. So no, I don't expect any issues.
Counselor, any other questions for the commissioner? All right, I don't see any other hands up. Counselor Letterman, do you have a question?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes. So I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on when the cameras are on and when they're off. So if I understand correctly, they're on anytime the lights and siren are activated on the vehicle the officer is assigned to. And then can you go over again the scenarios in which they would be manually switched on?
Sure. Well, the camera is always on.
Correct. I mean recording.
Yep. When it's activated, from either the emergency lights or manual activation, you'll see the prior 30 seconds of video only. And you were asking about when it's not going to, the discretionary recordings or the prohibited, sir?
You know, just when I know that it begins recording when the lights are turned on the vehicle, but under what other circumstances, if they were not in the vehicle, what circumstances are they required to turn it on?
Pretty much any official law enforcement activity. They do vehicle stops and they stop someone to do any type of investigation, any pat and frisk, canine searches.
So anytime they're engaging in a law enforcement activity, they would switch it on to record.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? All right, say again, are there any other questions? Don't see any other hands up, so Council President Hurst, if you're still there.
I am still here, and I think we can adjourn if there are no further meetings. I mean, if there are no further questions, then thank you, everyone. Thank you To everybody in the Situation Room, we certainly appreciate the demonstration. I think we're excited. And Councilor Ramos, you can close us out, and we'll leave as soon as you finish, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, just a huge thank you to everyone involved. Like I said, this is a very important moment in our city. This is a defining moment in how we handle police transparency and police community relations in our city from here moving forward. And so I'm glad to be here and thank everyone that was involved in making this happen for the city of Springfield. Thank you all for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
We'll see everybody at 3:30.
Thank you. Administration, thank you to all the officers and staff.
Thank you.